Oh yeah, Monique.
Yeah, hi there. I have a question. So I guess I'm just a little confused because it sounds like the program was underfunded, leading to phase two of the program not being implemented, but there's a surplus that has to go to a vote to potentially be returned. So why is it that there's a surplus that has to go to a vote to be returned if you're also saying that the meeting is, or excuse me, the program is underfunded?
Yeah, that is a great question. And the short answer is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Um, the longer answer is basically there's this provision of Tabor that says any program that raises more I apologize, I have a toddler here below. Um, so any program that raises more in year one than was on the ballot has to either return those funds, apologies, to either return those funds and adjust down the tax proportionally, or they need to go and get voter approval. So you might have remembered, like in recent years, there have been quite a few of these retain measures that come before voters. There was recently one on sports betting revenue that brought in more than was anticipated for water projects. There was another on a nicotine tax that brought in more for childcare. We're having to go back to voters because they brought in more than basically the economists predicted they would. And so that's a good thing for funding healthy school meals for all, but it's still not that much of a difference. It's not enough to cover the differences in costs that we saw, basically as a result of healthy school meals for all going into effect during peak food inflation. Does that answer your question, Monique?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I will say this is something that's coming up at the legislature this year. Like legislators are pretty frustrated that we keep having to run these retain measures on things that voters have already said we want. So they're looking at some solutions, but it's kind of tricky. And honestly, like my take on it is like this is one of those just really broken things about Tabor. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Ian.
So what can we do? How can we help?
Great question. Well, I think a big piece of what we need to do is educate legislators on the impact that this program is having, especially in local communities, so that they recognize that this is something worth putting on the ballot and putting back to voters to solve this long term. And then we are also going to get to some of the stuff we can do at a federal level in a second. But Nicholas, I think you were planning to speak to this, so I might pass to you if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks for the question. Uh, yeah, thank you. So yeah, we want people involved. Obviously, this is going to impact um schools across the state. I would like to add that from what we're hearing is some legislators have described that other part of the program, the wage boost, the local food in school meals, those things they've described them as ornamental, so it's extra, something that's not necessarily needed, which obviously I think that you would all agree with us that that's not the case, that this program was passed as a whole package for a reason. We've heard stories throughout the state where, cafeteria workers that were serving 200 kids are now serving double that amount, but they're still getting the same wage and they're not getting supported like they should, right? That's an issue, right? And that's not gonna make this program work as well as it can in the long term, right? I mean, there's a shortage of cafeteria workers as it stands now. Um, there's you know, other things we listen to. We've held listening sessions with communities across the state as well, Etika and myself. And, while the food is free, it can be better in quality. We've heard that a lot. And some parents want to see more culturally relevant foods. These things only come about if we have good tools at hand. So those things are ornament that those things aren't ornamental, right? A lot of people want to see that. and this is our best way forward. So, obviously we want more opportunities like this so we can inform folks. I would encourage you to do the same. HFC is, has been developing ongoingly ways you can, become involved, virtually. So sending letters to your legislator, leaving them a message. And also if you feel uh, inclined to, we also are going to have lobby days now at the Capitol. We provide lunch, um, a little stipend for your time, and obviously training to prep folks to talk to legislators. So that's something that we're hosting as well. I believe our first one's February 19th. I don't know what day of the week that is, but it's an open invite, and we would really love it if you all could come, or at least, again, either write or call your legislator to leave a message. I mean, seems small, but it goes a long way, and especially when you could get in front of people and tell them these stories like I'm telling you, it makes an impact. So, um, yeah, I'll leave it there. I don't know, Erika, if I missed something, you could chime in, or if there's any other questions, on those action items.
The only thing I'll add is that we can follow up with storytelling materials as well as an informative flyer for those lobby days. We're hoping to have a scattered amount of them, so February 19th is just the first one. But with that, I'll pass it over to Carmen with some stuff at the federal level, and I'll just say that, like, one thing to keep in mind is that our stories and our voice is something that's going to be really important, not just this year, but in the next 4 years in this current administration. So we really want to encourage you all to use your voice. I'll pass it over to Carmen.
Yeah, thanks, Erica, and thanks, team, for presenting. Yeah, so I can share with you a few federal updates. One of the things that you had asked for an update around is WIC. And we don't actually have any latest updates around WIC, any federal legislation to be aware of. But really what we're planning to do is to just look out for any threats to the program and to make sure that we're holding on to any hard-won gains over the next few years. And so one of those hard-won gains are these really positive regulation changes that happened in April of 2024. And basically every 10 years, the USDA has to review the food package, the WIC food package, and make sure that it's based on the latest dietary guidelines. And in this most recent review that resulted in some final regulations, we had some really positive things happen. So one of those was just having more balance and choice in the program so that folks can access foods that are more aligned with their dietary and cultural preferences. So for example, being able to switch out juice and milk for other items, or giving folks more of a choice over vegetables. And then another really important thing was increasing the fruit and vegetable allowance, also known as the cash value benefit, which is just basically the dollars that that person has available to purchase a food through the program. And so these were excellent changes that we were really happy to see happen, and that happened as a result of a long while of advocacy from folks in this space. And this is just something that we want to keep an eye on over the next few months and years. We are seeing already some proposals to cuts to important public benefits programs and just important programs that are part of our safety net. And so I think just being on the lookout for any threats to that, whether there are any proposed cuts to WIC in the future in the form of rolling back those benefit increases to that cash value allowance, and just being vigilant around that. So that's the only real WIC update I have. And most of my updates are really around SNAP and also very much around defense for the next few months and years. But what we see coming on the horizon in the next couple months is this process that's called budget reconciliation. And this is basically a budget bill that Congress plans to work on in late February, early March. And this bill is used to adjust revenue and spending, and it basically regards anything that affects the federal budget. And so it can actually be a very broad bill that can be used to pursue a lot of different policy goals without having to have a significant majority. So this budget bill only requires a simple majority, which would mean 51 votes in the Senate. And so we are already seeing some plans to use this bill as a way to both give tax cuts to the wealthy and also to be able to fund those cuts by making cuts to important programs that support our social safety net, among them SNAP. There's a couple of things that we are really concerned about and engaging in advocacy around. And one of those is cuts to SNAP, very significant cuts to SNAP, projected around $30 billion, but I've also seen numbers that are higher than that. And the way that this could be done is by restricting updates to something called the Thrifty Food Plan. And this is like kind of wonky, and this is why it's a sneaky way of doing this. But basically, the Thrifty Food Plan is this formula that's used to calculate SNAP benefit levels. And so USDA nutritionists and economists basically get together and project the cost of a really inexpensive diet that still meets basic nutritional needs. And then this is used to calculate SNAP benefits. Before the 2018 Farm Bill, this formula had never been updated with cost increases to actually reflect the cost of food. And so in about 30 years, it hadn't been increased, or benefits hadn't really been increased past inflation, and this formula had not changed. But the 2018 Farm Bill allowed the USDA to go back to revise that formula to account for current food prices and also for the ways that we prepare food have changed, like, for example, the invention of the microwave. And so this led to a very modest increase in SNAP benefits. But there are some budget proposals that have come out that seek to roll back these adjustments, either making sure that there aren't future adjustments that also change benefit levels, or even worse than that, going back and saying that, you know, this adjustment doesn't count. And so this would effectively cut SNAP benefits for SNAP participants going forward and reduce that purchasing power of SNAP dollars. So that's something that we're definitely really concerned about and are working on. And then we're also vigilant on any attacks on SNAP access, like, for example, additional work requirements. Currently, adults of a certain age on SNAP are required to work, and if they aren't working a certain number of hours, they have to meet some additional requirements or exemptions. So there already are work requirements that have been really proven to not actually promote work, just create additional barriers. And so we'll also be on the lookout for any attempts to add more work requirements, because that kind of seems to be a narrative around SNAP of, you know, we want people to work and we're going to make it harder to access this program unless people can really prove that they're working. And so that's not something that we've heard like really specific things around right now, but we're also just on the lookout for that. And in terms of the advocacy that we're engaging in, the policy team, that means connecting with legislators, explaining the importance of the program, and really just trying to make sure that our legislators in Colorado vote against any proposals that would harm SNAP. But I think it's also really important to have community engagement around this, especially in districts that have moderate Republicans, where it might be possible for the sway in the vote to actually make a really big difference in outcome. And I think maybe Anya will talk about this a little more later, but you know, Pueblo is in the district of a new Congress member. It might be a good moment to start connecting with your new member of Congress to start talking about the importance of these programs and why cuts would impact your community. And something as simple as reaching out to their office and asking for an appointment and just sitting down and talking with their district staff could really make a big difference. But I think we can talk a little bit more about that later because there's also some other changes or harmful proposals that we're looking at in that same budget package that are actually related to school meals. So I don't know, Anya, if you want to explain that or if anyone has any questions about SNAP or WIC right now.
And I do just want to give a gentle reminder on time, because we'll definitely need probably around 40 minutes to get to our other agenda items. So if y'all have anything else to share, I think particularly how folks can get engaged with advocacy or get more information, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I can wrap us up. Thanks. Yeah, so just one final thing that we just became aware of is that one of these proposals to save money is also basically cutting the school meals program by adding a lot more verification barriers and making it way harder for schools to do what D60 has done for years of using some programs to provide meals to all students, which would make healthy school meals for all even harder in Colorado. And so that's something we're really concerned about and want to fight back against. And you all are really uniquely positioned to have sway in this new Congress. I think these proposals are really scary. And also, it only takes a few Republicans saying we're not okay with this for the negotiations to get much, much harder. And so we are pulling together some information that we can share afterwards for ways to reach out. But I think this is an area where sharing the impact of these programs and especially school meals, and this is something that your area has done for even before the state program, there's a real potential to make a difference. And so if there are any ways that we can support in you all and building relationships with your congressional office or sharing messaging, we'd love to do so. And thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, y'all.